Time to review the 2024 Six Nations. I was going to, on Sunday, do a wider review of the whole tournament and speak about all six individual teams, but then I thought the danger of doing something like that is you end up skimming over things, the video becomes a bit longer, and I find generally people probably drop off because you're trying to cover absolutely everything. So I thought maybe the better way to do it is go through it team by team, and in this case do two teams at a time, starting with Ireland and France as the number 1 and number 2 ranked teams in this year's Six Nations. So if you're Irish, if you're French, if you're a fan of any other nation, then let me know in the comments section what you made of the Six Nations generally and what you made of Ireland and France, on where these two teams are off the back of a Six Nations, which has to be considered overall, I think, a success for both of them, but still with seasons ahead and where they are going to go. So drop it in the comments section. Welcome back to the channel. Make sure you like the video if you feel obliged, that is. And also make sure you are subscribed to the channel as well so you don't miss anything. So let's get into it. The top two again. Ireland number 1, France number 2. And it's the same as it was the previous year. But even though they might be in the same places in the rankings, it feels a bit different to me. It doesn't feel like they're as neck and neck as we have seen them previously. I think over 2022 and 2023, you kind of felt like home advantage was the difference, in that 2022, France do the Grand Slam and they beat Ireland in Paris. 2023, Ireland do the Grand Slam, they have the French in Dublin. Whereas this year, even though France had Ireland at home, you didn't feel like that was the deciding factor. It felt like Ireland were ahead of them. And France actually started this Six Nations pretty poorly, pretty slowly, and they were quite unconvincing in a lot of cases, but they still find themselves second, and I will get back on to that point. So things can change quickly, and on that note, I think things can change quickly between where these two teams are at the moment. France, it's generally been quite negative. They could easily, by the end of this year, still be considered arguably the best team in the Northern Hemisphere, or certainly right up there. And for Ireland, as brilliant as they've been, winning back-to-back titles, I think there are some questions for them heading forward in what is a tough year for Ireland. They have a brutal fixture list, which is going to be fascinating, but I think there's a lot of different things to consider. So starting off with Ireland as the champions, I said it in my video after the Ireland-Scotland game that whilst I will raise questions about this Ireland team, we have to appreciate what we're seeing in terms of the quality that they're producing. Back-to-back titles, yes, I know they did it in, was it 2014, 2015, or 15, 16, whatever it was. They have done it relatively recently, but it's not something that Ireland have done loads and loads of times throughout their history. Plus, when you factor in the fact that they became the number 1 team in the world, plus when you factor in the fact they went to New Zealand and won a 3-match series away to the All Blacks, it's a further reminder, it is further evidence of just how good this team has been. And I think it's right that we appreciate that. I know Ireland fans will absolutely appreciate that and won't take it for granted. But in these moments, it's important to signpost it whilst it's happening, because otherwise it breezes by and you'll look back on this era and thinking, blimey, we were lucky to witness this Ireland team. And actually, I was looking through some of the stats, like the team stats of this year's Six Nations. And Ireland, as you would expect, are still right up there, whether it's speed of the ruck, the tries scored, the amount of line breaks, the metres gained, their scrum was good, their line out was solid, pretty much all areas of the game for Ireland. They still look very, very good indeed. But those of you that did watch my video following that Scotland victory, which secured them the title, I did question just whether in the last 2 rounds of this championship they had dropped off very slightly. They've set such high standards that naturally, when teams who have been so good for so long drop off very slightly, we can fall into the trap of making too big a deal of it. I'm not saying that they are going backwards. I'm not saying that they're not still a very, very good team. But I just wonder whether, in terms of their attack, they've been a bit more sloppy. Scotland and England, from a defensive point of view, I think were able to disrupt the Ireland game more than we've often seen teams do previously. And whether there are some elements of their game plan at the moment that they're going to have to sharpen up ahead of that summer series when they head to South Africa. And I think Andy Farrell will be aware of that. And I guess the question I posed in that video I did was how concerned Ireland fans were. Overall, understandably and correctly, the sentiment has been, we're not that concerned. I think there is a feeling that they more stumbled over the line rather than just dominating everyone as it looked like they might do in the opening 3 rounds of the Six Nations. There was maybe a bit of fatigue. creeping in by the end. They got there, they did what they needed to do. But in a sense, I actually think this could be a positive thing for Ireland, in so much as it sharpens their attention ahead of that series against South Africa, because you know the Springboks are going to be absolutely gunning for them. That's a huge series for both of these nations. For South Africa in particular, they have been smarting, I think, with some justification about the whole narrative around this Ireland team being the best team in the world when the Springboks won the World Cup at the end of last year, and they will want to prove a point. It's going to be such a tough series, and I think just having themselves be tested a little bit more, have that defeat against England, be run fairly close against Scotland, even though Scotland maybe themselves, in an attacking sense, didn't fire a shot. It was still a close game in terms of the scoreline. I think those things could be good for Ireland, to sharpen the focus, sharpen the attention, and just allow them to refocus ahead of that massive series against the Springboks. So I think they will turn that into a positive. If we're looking ahead for Ireland as well, I think there are question marks. The thing I'm most interested at this moment in time is when Andy Farrell decides it is time to transition to some different players. Cian Healy is still the option coming off the bench in the front row. Conor Murray at scrum half as well. There are question marks over Peter O'Mahony for how much longer he's going to keep going. I don't necessarily think this summer will be the time we see all of those players depart because of the calibre of opposition they are coming up against. I don't think they'll go down that route of freshening up those positions quite yet, but it is something they're going to have to do in the not too distant future. When they do that, how they do that, with what success they're able to do that, could be one of the big challenges of the next kind of 3 or 4 years for this Ireland team. Now, I think they'll be able to do it because I think they've got great players coming through. It seems like Ryan Baird is the natural successor at the moment to Peter O'Mahony. And they have a lot of great players coming through that system. Plus, we've seen Jack Crowley come in at 10 and he's looked good in the Six Nations. I thought Calvin Nash looked solid on the wing coming in for Matt Hansen. We saw Joe McCarthy in the second row, who for the first 3 rounds was absolutely outstanding. I think they have the ability to bring players into this team and then be successful, and that's going to continue to be a challenge for them with some of those names that I mentioned. The one other thing I'll mention in terms of Ireland, looking ahead to the future, not so much for the summer because Mike Catt will still be there, but Mike Catt is leaving in terms of being in charge of the attacks. Andrew Goodman coming in, I think it's a good appointment. I'm excited to see what he does. From what I've read about him, it appears like he's very creative in what he comes up with. And when you consider that this is an Ireland attack that just maybe needs to develop slightly, if teams are starting to work out how best to play against them, then he could be a really good appointment coming in. But nonetheless, that is another big transition in the coaching perspective for Ireland to get over. So that's kind of my general views on Ireland. Overall, huge success again. Yes, it wasn't the Grand Slam, and back-to-back Grand Slams would have been historic, but they're still an excellent team. They have the coaches in place, they have the quality of players coming through for them to continue to be successful. But I think the last couple of performances and results have shown us there are areas this team needs to sharpen up, and I think they'll do that. Let's get on to France. So they finished second behind Ireland, and I've just been waxing lyrical about how great this Ireland team is, and I completely stand by those comments. So it's harsh to be too negative on France in a way, but I still have questions about them, which maybe I'll get onto. But someone else pointed this out in the comment section of a video I did the other day, actually, about France, where I was quite negative, and they were saying it's a French team that have finished second. They haven't necessarily played that well. In quite a few games, they were below what they would expect of themselves. And they still have the likes of Dupont to come back into the team. We saw other players get injured. Maybe we should all be really fearful actually. Maybe this isn't the downward trend of this French team, but actually they're simply going to come again. It's just a slight blip. And I think there's absolutely the case that could be. Because... And the England game was a good example of this. They've got so much power in their starting team, in their options coming off the bench, in the players that probably weren't even selected for that game. Plus, they have the skill in the team in an attacking sense as well. So I think France will be okay. But they haven't been as convincing. There's been a lot of games this Six Nations where they were pretty poor. you know, that game against Italy, they were fortunate to beat Scotland. They obviously got blown away against Ireland on the opening night. There were times where England did a good job, maybe it's more to do with what England did, but of putting pressure on them and putting points on them. Even Wales, who are in the doldrums, were able to score some tries on this French team. So they don't look as polished, they don't look as dangerous, but they still have a lot of the quality there to continue to be successful. I think I mentioned some of the stats for Ireland. Again, just flicking through it from the French point of view, they've kicked a lot less. Their kicks in play have been a lot less. And previously, France were always a team that kicked more than anyone else. It was such a cornerstone of their game and actually what made them successful. And I just wonder why that is. Has that been because of the absence of Dupont? He is one of the best, if not the best, kicking nines in the world, and they do kick a lot off nine. Is that the reason for it, or are they trying to develop their game plan and move away from that kicking style, and maybe there's some teething problems there? That's something that probably going forward, quite a niche specific area of their game, but a fundamental one, that I think is worth keeping an eye on for how this French team want to play. But as I say, I mean, set piece is good. The power in their backline, the power across the team, the attacking intent they've showed. It looks like Lagarec, I think, is a great find for how he's come in. Barre at fullback as well, another young player in his early 20s that has come into the team and I think looked pretty good as well. Toma Ramos is he the best goal kicker in the world? I think he probably is. Damien Penaud was a threat as always, got loads of try assists actually this Six Nations, as well as his customary crossing the whitewash. So yeah, it's not. There's obviously questions for France, but it's also very difficult to be too critical when they've still ended up only losing the one game. Yeah, I know they drew against Italy, but losing just once, coming second. I do have questions, but equally, I give them time to be able to figure it out. I'm not quite at the point where I'm passing full judgment on them that they are in some sort of manic decline. I don't think that is quite the case yet. But without question, there are things to keep an eye on. So is there anything else I've missed? Undoubtedly there will be. In these videos you can never cover absolutely everything. It's more kind of a smattering of my thoughts when I think about Ireland, when I think about France. Monday afternoon following the conclusion of a Six Nations, that's where I feel they are. What do you make of it? Let me know, commenting down below. Make sure you like the video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And tomorrow I'll be doing a video on England and Scotland. So England fans, Scotland fans, give me your views on how your teams did this Six Nations. That's coming your way. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.